Module 3, Metaphysics. Lecture 3A, Nominalism versus Realism, Dualism. Metaphysics. Metaphysics means beyond physics. What is reality? It's sometimes called ontology, theory of being. A person's ontology is what they believe exists in the universe. We all have our own ontology, things we believe in and things we don't believe in. There are three approaches to metaphysics taken by philosophers. Dualism means there are two kinds of substances in the universe, body and soul, or mind and matter. The opposite of dualism is monism, or belief there's only one substance. Idealistic monism or idealism teaches that only mind exists. Materialistic monism or materialism teaches that only matter exists. We will be exploring dualism, idealism, and materialism, these three approaches. But first, let us turn to one of the oldest questions in philosophy, nominalism versus realism. Universals, nominalism versus realism. To introduce the topic, let us turn to one of the oldest, most fascinating debates in philosophy. We all understand what we mean when we say a cloud is white or something else is white, a car is white. But does whiteness exist as a separate entity in and of itself? Do spiritual entities really exist, or such entities merely human inventions? Did whiteness exist before there were ever any people in the world? If such spiritual entities exist, we call them universals. Whiteness is a universal. Take the numbers, for example. Do the numbers 1, 2, 3, etc. really exist in some spiritual realm so that we humans discovered them? Did numbers exist even before humans existed? Or did humans simply invent them? Do geometric shapes have a reality that we discovered? Or are they mere names we invented? What about ideas like good and evil? Do they really exist in some spiritual realm, or are they mere human conventions? This will be a vital question when we study ethics. The idea that numbers, shapes, and concepts really exist in some spiritual realm is called realism. The most famous realist was Plato, who envisioned a perfect world of the forms. On the other hand, perhaps numbers, shapes, and concepts are mere human conventions, names we humans give to certain ideas. This approach is called nominalism, from the word name. These human conventions are mere names. To some extent, Plato's student Aristotle was a nominalist because he denied the presence of any spiritual forms. One famous nominalist was William of Ockham, 1285 to 1347, who taught that we should not multiply entities beyond what is necessary to explain phenomena. This is known as Occam's razor, often spelled O-C-C-A-M, Occam's razor. He did not need spiritual realities to explain the world. There's just the world that we see. He was a nominalist. Occam's razor is central in modern scientific thinking. We always choose the simplest explanation in a scientific hypothesis that demands the fewest number of assumptions. We avoid multiplying entities if unnecessary. The argument between realism and nominalism goes right to modern science. Scientific realism teaches that the theories that we teach correspond to truths about the universe. If science predicts that certain events will cause certain other events, this reflects the true reality about the universe. Science tests its theories by looking for a correspondence between scientific theories and realities. This is close to the correspondence theory of truth. Scientific realism says that there are really things out there that cause what we see. This view has been challenged by a second view known as anti-realism or epistemic science, similar to nominalism. This teaches that science can only predict what we see, the results of experiments. No claims can be made whether there is a reality corresponding to these results. Does the theory work? This is close to the pragmatic theory of truth. The most obvious example of epistemic science is quantum theory. Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr argued about this their entire lives. Einstein said that quantum theory must correspond to reality. Bohr argued that quantum theory is useful. It's a useful tool, but it does not correspond to reality because ultimately reality is unknowable. Sounds like Kant. Dualism. Dualism teaches there are two substances, body and mind, or matter and spirit. Each exists independent of the other. The most influential dualist, often called substance dualist, was Descartes. We've studied him already. Descartes called body an extended thing, res extensa, as opposed to the mind, which is a thinking thing, res cogitans. How do they interact? One answer suggested by Leibniz is pre-established harmony. God causes them to work together. A similar kind of dualism was suggested by the Islamic philosopher Avicenna, 930 to 1037, long before Descartes. He developed a thought experiment of a floating man, blindfolded, unable to touch his limbs. He would be unaware of his body, but he would be aware of his soul, the part of him that thinks. Avicenna combined Islam with Aristotle. Later, Thomas Aquinas, 1225 to 1274, who we'll study later in the course, preferred Aristotle to Plato, argued with this dualism. For Aristotle, the soul was not a separate entity, but a function of the body. Aquinas followed Aristotle's principle of hylomorphism, which teaches that you cannot have form without substance, spirit without matter. The soul and body are intimately connected. For example, it's not like a captain who runs a ship aground and my ship has been damaged, viewing the ship as something separate. Rather, if we injure ourselves, we are more apt to say, I have been hurt. We do not differentiate spirit from our bodies. Philosopher Gilbert Ryle, 1900 to 1976, called dualism the ghost in the machine. He was making fun of it. Modern science has shown that mind is simply a function of body. At least that's what materialism says. There's still dualists around. I'm one, for example. And for example, David Chalmers, born in 1966, claims that mind is a fundamental property of the universe distinct from body. If you study the most fundamental building blocks of creation, there is matter like Adam, and there's also bits of mind, similar to Leibniz's monads. Chalmers defined the hard problem of consciousness, the difficulty science has in explaining subjective experience. As we have already seen, Spinoza questioned how two fundamental substances could exist, each limiting the other. There must be one substance that makes up the universe, which Spinoza called God or nature. We will turn now to monism, the belief that everything is ultimately one substance. Is that one substance mind or matter?